welcome to another brand new episode here on 1950's Farm. How are you all doing? Are you all having a good day? I hope so, and I hope your day is going just as well as you hoped it would do. My day not going so bad, but could be better. I've received word that there may well be a storm coming on the horizon. And I'm not talking about a weather storm, but I'm sure if things happen that they're expected to happen, or it does in fact, end up affecting me, I'm sure at some point you'll hear about it. But at the moment, it's a bit down, but just holding tight. Yes. Anyway. As Mr. Jolly would say, or Jolly Roger would say, that's enough of that nonsense. If you haven't done already, go check out his YouTube channel. Very, very funny man. Very, very funny man. Very sort of kind of, if I had to describe him, very prim and proper, very English, but very, very, very comical, very dry sense of humour, and very, 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 very funny. Definitely a good watch and definitely very entertaining. But yeah, so yeah, as I say, hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all having a good day. What are we up to today on the farm? Well, as you can see today, we've got the muck spreader out, and we are getting our ground muck spread. We've also got some drilling to do, which we will be getting on with next, hopefully. So we've got the field, we've got this field to drill. Now that the soybeans are off, we can get this muck spread, we'll get it ploughed, and then we'll get it drilled with wheat, and we'll go again. But as I say, I kind of, the problem is that on 1950's farm, work's quite repetitive, sort of all of the time. And the thing is, like, you watch all of these how-to things, and you watch all these people doing videos on how to make the best farm sim videos, and how to do this, that, and everything else. And one of the biggest things that they always say is that oh, you shouldn't repeat jobs. Well, I get that. I get that someone, that people don't want 9 videos in a row of someone combining or whatever. But on the flip side to that, I'm like, but this is farming, and unfortunately, this is what happens. That if we have a lot of land, or if we, have a modest amount of land, but we don't have very big equipment, then sadly, it means we're going to be combining a while, or we're going to be ploughing a while, or we're going to be, whatever a while. And so I kind of, in the past, I've tried to sort of compromise that by not really showing the mundane sort of wintry jobs, like when I'm in the cow barn, just mucking out and rebedding and strawing and strawing, feeding. If we could use some proper English language, that would be magical. But yeah, so I've sort of tried to do that, but it's kind of like, well, it's a little bit hard. I liken it a little bit to, and people that live in the UK will sort of kind of understand this comparison. It's a bit like the other day I watched. So I really like Football Manager. I play it a little bit. I'm not that good at the game, if I'm honest. That game relies quite heavily on maths in terms of running budgets and wage budgets and stuff like that. And I'm not very good at maths, and so therefore, I do enjoy playing it, but after a season or two, I've usually bankrupt the club. And if you do that, you don't get another job. on the game, because they look at that record and go, well, he could likely bankrupt us, so no, we're not giving him a job. But I do like the game. I do enjoy it, but obviously I like watching other people that are good at the game play the game, because I think, if I could do that, and I've tried to emulate a few, of course. I mean, I grew up in sort of 2000 and sort of probably 11, 12, something like that. When I first started watching YouTube, and the first few sort of farm sim videos sort of came through, I grew up watching them and sort of trying to emulate, their playthroughs. And it's the same, really today with sort of, watching farm sim and sort of thinking, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing a little bit of that in a private game, and what have you. I mean, for the YouTube series, I try my hardest to come up with new stuff, and it's not always easy. It's a bit like, I belong to a writing club, and they were always saying, oh, the key to writing is coming up with an original idea. Sadly, we're sort of probably a few hundred years down the line, and there aren't too many more original ideas left out there. Most books, I would argue, today are in some way based loosely on something that we've already seen. And as I've sort of because I've recently joined the writing club, so and I said to the lady, she's going, oh, your ideas need to be original, they need to be, blah 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 blah, but you need to read as much as you can. And I said to her, but then that kind of invalidates that ideas need to be original, doesn't it? And she sort of looked at me and said, how do you figure that out? And I said, well, if we're going to read as much as we can, because that's going to improve our writing, I said, surely that means that actually what we read will influence what we write. So therefore, no longer has it become original, it's being, sort of influenced and dictated to by what we've already read. I said, that's why I don't read. I said, because I said I used to hate it when I used to read. I said I used to read, 3 or 4 books a week, probably even more than that. I said, and obviously, I was writing all the time, and a lot of people that I would give my work to were also big readers, and they would say, oh, that reminds me of that story, oh, that reminds me of that story. I said, and I hated that, because I wasn't trying to be that story, I wasn't trying to, recreate that story, I was trying to do my own thing. And so therefore I stopped reading, because then I couldn't be influenced by, the things that I read in, other people's novels and books and that, and I said, I tend now to kind of watch like TV dramas, which again influences what I write in a way. I said, but is less kind of influential than actually having it in book form, where I don't know, but I sort of tried to make the point, and because I can't remember everything I fully said, and I made a really good point while I was there, and I was like, when I started that sort of, I was like, yeah, I'm going to say that because that was a really good point, and now I can't remember what it is. Never mind. The joys of being me. But yeah, so as I say, I have the sort of same situation with farming sim. It's kind of I've sort of in a way stopped watching a lot of farming sim videos, because I don't want to be, sort of not accused, but I don't want people to sort of think, oh yeah, so and so's doing that, when I see that, so that's where he's got that from, um, and so therefore I sort of, I'm a bit less reluctant to watch, a bit more reluctant to watch, sort of farming sim videos, so I don't sort of get, not accused, as I say, of copying, but so I'm not tempted to copy. I think it's probably a better way of putting it. But yeah, so as I say, it does become a bit hard, because it's kind of like, well, you know, if you're telling me not to repeat, and like I was going to say with the Football Manager thing, you know, I watched one on that the other day, and you know, that kind of said, you know, don't repeat videos, you know, in a row, sort of thing, you know. So like, you know, and I sort of thought, kind of, but the whole point of Football Manager is that you play football games over 9 months against, you know, all these different real world teams, and you know, it's, you're hoping you come out best at the end, you know. And I'm thinking, how on earth can you not make the same video time and time again? Because the game repeats itself over and over and over and over. That's the point of the game. That's why we watch it. That's why, you know, why some of us play it, you know. And it's the same with Farming Sim. You know, I was chatting with you know, someone the other day, and I was sort of kind of saying to them, well, to Chris, who lives in the village, and I was saying to him, you know, I said, I don't know whether, because like he heard the video that I put out about sort of saying, well, I don't know if I'm gonna sort of stop doing YouTube, because, say, you know, like, and I don't know, I don't want this to sound crass or like I'm whinging or whining or anything like that, but I'm just saying it as it is. You know, I put out a video every day. You know, for those that make farm sim videos, they you know, they appreciate sort of, it's not a 10-minute thing. You know, you spend 3 or 4 hours playing, you know, probably, and then another 3 or so hours editing and getting that down to sort of half an hour, 40 minutes. You know, sometimes it is a bit longer. But you know, the aim for me is 35 minutes, and then sort of getting it as close to that as I can get it. You know, I mean, it's a bit like the chatty ones. You know, I think a lot of people would probably be of the misconception that I speak for, you know, say 40 minutes, done, convert to YouTube video, upload, finished. You know, that isn't the case. A chatty video, you know, I'm normally talking for around sort of 2-3 hours, and then, you know, I have to edit that down then, and then sort of, you know, then my two lovely ladies get hold of it. They then go through it. Now that bit's got to come out, and what they'll do is they'll write it down, and like the time when, you know, I was sort of saying whatever it was that I was saying, and then you know, we'll sort of go from there, and you know, we edit them bits out, because I do have see, I've said before, so I fancy myself as a little bit of a little bit of a comedian. All right, and I'll give you an example of this, right? Of what I find funny compared to what other people don't find funny, right? so, so at the weekend, I was chatting with a couple of people, and I went away, and I went out for the afternoon and the evening, and when I got back they were still at my mum's. And when I walked in, the lady in question, she will remain nameless, but the lady in question was very upset, and her husband was trying to console her, you know, and you know, sort of mum was doing her best too. And so I've come in, and you know, I've known the people for a long time. It's not like I didn't know who they were, or, you know, I've known them for a very, you know, I've known them since I was a small kid. So I've come in and gone, oh my God, you know, what's the matter? And she said, you know Jess? And so I said, yeah. So she said, well, she died tonight. And I said, oh, that's terrible. I said, that's really awful. I said, oh, I'm ever so sorry, because they were really good friends, right? And I don't know why, right? My head, as soon as, like, you know, I mean, it's like today, you know, I said, sort of opened this video with, there's a storm coming, and I'm talking about a weather storm, you know, in my life. and all I've done all morning is sit taking the mick out of myself. You know, it's how I cope with really terrible news. You know, it's how I sort of deal with it. You know, and you know, it's just a coping mechanism for me. You know, and so I'm sort of sitting anyway. I'm sort of sitting on the settee, like, you know. And I sort of said, can I get you a drink or whatever? So it's like, yeah. So it goes off, then I makes his cup of tea. Well, while I'm making the cup of tea, right, for everyone, I think, I know what I'll do. I'll tell her a joke. And my head's going, might not be the best time. Read the room, son. Read the room, son. It might not be the best time. But the other side of my head's going, I'll tell her a joke. That'll cheer her up. I'll make her laugh. If you make someone laugh, whatever their problem is, it always seems a lot less after you've made them laugh. My head's going, read the room, son. Read the room, son. I don't think a joke is the most appropriate thing at this moment in time. So I makes the cup of tea. I goes into the room. I deliver all of the tea. I sit down in the chair. I says to her, I says, do you want me to cheer you up? My head's going, don't do it. Don't do it. Please don't do it. I was like, she goes, how? I said, I'll tell you a joke. And she loves my jokes. She finds me very funny. I was thinking this is going to work. And my head's going, don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't do it. What joke are you going to tell her? I said, knock joke. She was like, no, don't do it. So she goes, go on then. So I said, knock. She said, who's there? I said, not Jess. I burst out laughing. And, well, I genuinely thought her husband was going to kill me. Yeah, it was a sticky situation. And my head, I could actually physically hear inside my own head, my head, you know, sort of my mind slapping my forehead going, what has he done? Why is he saying that? And that's how I tend to sort of deal and cope with stuff, right? So I you know, I sort of make a joke. But yeah, it didn't go down very well. I don't know why. I'm not sure. You know, and so I, you know, as I say, I tend to, you know, to put. So in my videos, I tend to have a lot of comedy and a lot of sort of kind of, and I don't do as much of it now. Mainly because I just in the end got so tired of, you know, my two lovely ladies going, well, I don't think you can put that in. I don't think. I mean, it was like, you know, last week in the farmers market. So I did that video, right? And something happened at the end of the video, right? And I did an accent from the UK, right? So I did an impression of the accent from the UK, right? It was the Birmingham accent, right? I won't do it. It's not offensive for me to say it as long as I don't do the accent. All right, mate. And that's going to have to come out. Anyway, so so I did the impression. And anyway, a little bit, sort of like a minute or so later in the video, as I'm going through, you know, I then sort of, my head goes, well, that's not really a real Birmingham accent, is it? That's just the funny one. That's just the one that people use to take the mick out of people. And in my head, this conversation is going on. Well, what's a real Birmingham accent then? Because I don't know, that's how they sound. And my head went, yeah, the real Birmingham accent is. And of course, I then did another impression of a group of people from foreign shores, right? And I'm not doing this impression because I don't want to get blown up or stabbed. And now I get a phone call, you know, not 20 minutes after I finish recording that video, and I've sent it off to the lovely ladies. And what they do is they tend to skip the time lapse bits because they say, you're not saying anything, you can't upset anyone, right? So we sort of skip that bit because we don't need to watch that bit. That's just farming. Not interested in farming. I'm just interested in keeping you out of prison and stopping you from getting beat up and everything else, right? So of course that bit was at the end of the video because literally within minutes of each other, both ladies are ringing me going, you've got to get that, you've got to redo the ending, you've got to redo the ending, the whole ending has got to be redone. You cannot say that on a video. I was like, why not? I said, like, you know, I said, it's an accent, it's how they talk. She said, yeah, she goes, you are singling out an entire race. I was like, but it's just a joke. And she's like, yeah, but if people don't find it funny, you know, you could be in a lot of trouble. And I was like, but it's just a joke. And they're like, yeah, but you know, they said like if you're Ricky Gervais, you could probably get away with it. You probably would get away with it. I would probably say it's fine, leave it in. She said, but you're not Ricky Gervais, and I would definitely be taking that out. So I had to redo that video, and so that's the kind. Now I realise sort of that's my own sort of thing, you know, that I do that off my own back. But I I spend, as I say, quite a bit of my time every day. You know, sort of doing. It takes. I'll probably start recording. I mean, like today is a little bit later because I had to do some things this morning, so I'm a little bit later today. I got up early and had some, as I say, some things that I needed to get done. So you know, to be starting a video at sort of, you know, roughly 20 to 10, 9:30, 20 to 10. It's quite late in the day for me. Normally, I'm a couple of hours into recording by now, if not getting close to being finished recording, and then I'll spend the rest of the day. Well, it will then go off to my two lovely ladies, and then once they've kind of okayed it and said that there's nothing in there that needs taking out. I mean, if there, you know, if there is stuff in there, obviously that's part of the editing, so you know that helps. But then I spend, you know, sort of the next couple of 3 hours editing that video and getting it down to, you know, a sensible time, and what have you. And because you're doing all this, and then, you know, most days my videos are struggling to get to like 30, 40 views, right? Now I don't know whether it's because I do my videos this way, where I just talk about general random things, and people just don't want it. I don't know whether it's because, you know, I do pretty much the same thumbnails for every video, and whether people kind of then sort of think, yeah, you know, I don't know what it is. I don't, you know, I don't know whether it's just because at the moment I'm still a fairly new YouTuber and I've just got to be patient, and you know, and eventually, you know, it will start to happen. I mean, you go back a year ago on sort of 1950's farm, I was getting, you know, sort of regularly 300-400 views within sort of the first 2 days. Now, you know, I've got one now that's 1 month old, and it hasn't got to 12 views yet. And so I don't, you know, I sort of don't know what it is. But anyway, the other week it made me sort of quite low and quite down, and I sort of, you know, thought I'm putting all this effort in, and I'm not really, I don't. So the views for me are a bit, you know, the subscribers mean that someone, this is how I sort of interpret it, mean that, you know, people are saying, yeah, I like that video, and I've watched a few more of your videos, you know, and gone back a little bit, watched a few more, and actually I really like them too, so therefore you're worth subscribing to, because that way every day I will get, you know, notified when you drop a video. And so that's kind of how I view it. So when you're only sort of getting, like yesterday's video for example's gone out, and at the moment I think just before I started recording it had reached 10 videos, right? 10 videos, 10 views, right? And it's a little bit deflating. You know, and then it's kind of like, well, okay, is it because I do the same jobs, you know? But then I sort of kind of think to myself, well, what am I to do, you know? So I don't know. I've sort of kind of got to the point where I've sort of been questioning, you know, sort of whether it's worth doing, whether it's worth carrying on, you know, whether I should just do a couple of videos a week. And with the storm that's coming, that may well be a thing. You know, that may well have to happen, because I'm very, very fearful at the moment. So very briefly, for those of you that live in the UK, you'll know that at the moment the Keir Starmer dictatorship has decided to now target, you know, the disabled, the sick, and you know, sort of anyone classed within that bracket. I am included in that bracket, and they're sending us back to work, and they're saying that if you don't go back to work, you won't get no money. And it has now left me you know, very, very worried. You know, I've been, you know, sort of medically signed off by, you know, St Bart's in London, by the GP. You know, I've been for all the Livy assessments, and they're now saying that all of that is irrelevant. That if they have one of their assessors now assess me, and that their assessor decides that I'm, you know, fit enough to go back to work, I will be going back to work, and I will have no choice, because it's either that or I live on nothing. And I can assure people that think that people that live on benefits are creaming it. We're not. You know, I live on virtually nothing anyway, but it is enough for me to pay my you know, my mum's sort of rent slash board, you know, that she charges me to live here, which is right. You know, that's absolutely, you know, right that she does that. And then I have sort of a little bit of money left over, you know, when sort of the car tax is paid, when car insurance is paid every month, when MOT, so the garage that I go to, one of the reasons why I use this garage is because they allow me to pay any repairs and my MOTs monthly, which obviously really helps, because, you know, just at the moment my car's got quite a few things that are going wrong with it, and the last bill came in at £455. Well, I don't have that, you know, from month to month I don't have that amount of money, so to be able to pay them monthly, you know, and they're very, very good about it. You know, they understand. They, you know, don't charge me no interest. You know, I just literally each month I pay them a set amount, and then you know, that covers. And then if such a thing for a couple of years I didn't have any repairs, I was still paying that amount a month, and then it put me ahead. So if any repairs needed doing, they already had a set balance off me, and so it really helps. You know, it really does help. And it's people like that in, you know, sort of my life. I speak just for myself, because, you know, that's sort of all I can do. Is it makes my life a lot easier when people are understanding like that and people are helpful like that. But yeah, so I'm currently, as I say, exceptionally worried, because it you know, and that on sort of on top of, and I realise that YouTube worries are trivial compared, but, you know, it's still something that plays on my mind, that, you know, sort of plays with me, and it you know, it is a little bit deflating. You know, you sort of think, you know, I'm putting all that effort. You know, my plan has always been never to monetize the channel, because I don't think that people should. You know, I sort of watch other YouTubers. I'm not going to name any of them, because there are, you know, hundreds of thousands out there, and then that would feel like I'm picking on a specific person or whatever. But, you know, there's hundreds of thousands of channels out there that are monetized, and be a member and get the video 2 days early. No, you know, I make videos because I want to share my videos with people, and I want people to watch them, and I don't want that to cost people their hard-earned money, when life is hard enough as it is for all of us. You know, let alone me then sort of start saying, you know, oh, by the way, you're gonna have to give me 12 quid, you know, a month if you want to see my videos. No, it's not happening. You know, it's not happening. And so I, you know, I sort of don't know. And, you know, a lot of people have said, well, that's not really the way to view it and what have you, but it is for me, you know. And a lot of people, you know, have sort of said, like, you know, sort of Chris and that, you know, oh, why don't you do merchandise? Like, I'd buy a hoodie, and as it is, actually, I have made him a hoodie, and I see he was at work on it the other day, and he's got two altogether, and he said the other one I wear when I go out. He said, because it's free advertising for you. So, you know, like as I say, I'm really grateful for that. I knew I was too wide then. So yeah, I have sort of, you know, really questioned it over the last little while, because as I say, it does get me down a little bit. You know, the sort of subscribers has pretty much stopped, and you know, it is very difficult. But yeah, anyway, I felt like I needed to kind of say all that. So today was going to be a chatty video, and is going to be a chatty video. But yet again, so every week I like to sort of chat in general, and then I like to sort of give a farm related story to a farming video, because that's what a lot of people like and enjoy. And yesterday, while I was recording an episode of the farmers market, I told a story, and as I say, the farmers market, another one of those series is that struggles to get 10 views in a week. So I thought, well, this is still my best viewed series. I'll sort of repeat it in here, because I know that the people that do watch this series do enjoy, the farming stories, especially when, the story is about me being an idiot. And in my second year of farming, full time, I was a big idiot. So anyone will know that listens to these stories will know that the first farm I worked on, most of my family had worked on that farm. It was a farm that knew all of my family, that knew me, knew my history, knew everything about my illness and everything like that, right? But as a kid, I used to stand, sort of on the edge of the field, watching their tractors in the field behind my house where I grew up, going up and down, up and down, up and down. Every time they were in the field, if I wasn't at school, I was out there watching the tractors. Just loved tractors from day one, and if my granddad was in the field on the track marshal crawler ploughing, he would come down, because my nan and granddad, from my mum and dad, they lived like a 2-minute car journey and a probably 10-minute walk. We did not live. I mean, in the winter when all the trees had lost the leaves, you could see my nan's house from our house. From where I was, growing up, and my granddad would pop down after work and say to mum, "Oh, I'm going to be in the field tomorrow. Make sure James is up." And mum would pack me a little lunch and what have you, and I would go out there and I would ride on the crawler all day with my granddad, just going up and down the field. And and we would stop for a snack at 9 o'clock and what have you, and then we'd stop for lunch, and it was brilliant. It's just like my days. And because it was a 6 for dad's well reversible plough with the track marshal crawler, I think, for those interested, I think it was the track marshal 90. I think I'm right in saying that. If I can, I will go to the farm, because it's only just down the road from where I live now, where I worked, and I will ask the boss man if I can take a picture of the track marshal and then post it. But I'm sure it was the track marshal 90. What I might do is I might go off when I edit the video, if I remember. I will try and find a picture. It'll be easier for me to find a picture on the internet, and then I'll just put the picture, at the end of the video. But yeah, so that, I grew up with that farm, as I say, and the boss man was not entirely always sympathetic to my condition. He sort of decided, no, you're working here, therefore that makes you as fit as the other full-time worker that was there, which was John, and then the part-time worker, which was Ray, who I'll talk about on this series, who helps me with this series. And anyway, this particular year, I think it was the second year, I'm pretty certain that I'd worked there. It was a really, really wet spring, really wet winter, really wet spring. Literally none of the field work that we would normally do in the winter, or in late autumn, winter, in preparation for the spring work to start, had been done. So we had no winter ploughing done. We had no, none of that. And when the sun finally did come out, which was in April, the boss man said to me, look, right, you just work as many hours as you want to work, you know, and just, this is what I need doing, these are the fields I need doing it in, you know, if you want to work, you know, till midnight every night, till 3 o'clock in the morning every day, I don't care, just, you know, get the work done. So like, no problem, you know, no problem at all. For good, I'll earn some money. And you know, so anyway, we gets to this particular Saturday, right, and I'm ploughing, right, and I've been ploughing till sort of 1, 2 o'clock in the morning every sort of day for about a week solid, right, and it got to the Saturday, right, and I remember it like it was just a few minutes ago, right, I absolutely remember the day as if it was a few minutes ago. So I gets to work in the morning, and the boss man's there, and he says, right, he says, I want you to go up onto Lighthouse Field. So I said, right. He said, you've been in there before, ain't you? So I said, yeah. He said, you know where it is, don't you? I said, yeah, I can get there, that's no problem. He said, you're a good man. He said, what I want you to do, he said, obviously just plough the field. So I said, right. He said, but what I want you to do is, I want you to press it. Okay, no problem. So he said, like, I've taken the press up there already. So I was like, right, fine, thank you. So he said, all you got to do is literally start ploughing, and then when you come back, he said, I've positioned it all. He said, just hook onto it, and obviously, you know, and then just start ploughing. So I was like, yeah, fair enough. He said, and mind the telegraph poles in there, the electricity pylons, and you know, there was some other stuff in that field as well. Yeah, I will do. Yeah, that's no problem. So he said, like, you know, just take your time and just look what you're doing. So I said, yeah, no problem. So he says to me, he says, I won't see you for the rest of the day. So I said, no. He said, no. He said, Grand National's on today. He said, you know, I like my horse racing. Yeah, he said, the rugby's on today. You know, he said, like, I'll be watching the football scores and different things. So all these things was happening on this particular day. So I said, yeah. He said, just go up there. He said, and, you know, just plough the field. Okay, no problem. So I sets off, and I goes and ploughs the field. Now the Grand National comes on at about 4 o'clock, I think. It was definitely 4 o'clock this year, anyway, that it happened. Because I just remember literally the leading up to what happened, and then the kind of what happened. So it's about 3:45, and I'm within a few breeds now of the mass clump of like telegraph poles, electricity pylons. There was like a fuse box there. There was quite a few bits and pieces in that field, right? And it was, as I say, it was called the Lighthouse Field because many years ago there used to be a lighthouse at the top of that field. Obviously, it's not there no more, and what have you. So, but it's called Lighthouse Field, right? And in that field also, there's a couple of World War II bunkers. There's a couple of like lookout things because it's over the looks out over the North Sea, and on the marsh of where we live. Like, you know, it's a little way away, but it's a field they had it, you know, and what have you. And I love that field because of the sort of history and the stories that if that field could talk, it could tell, you know, of the war. And, you know, at the sort of, we have another field down there that's called the Airfield Field. And obviously that was a World War II, warfield, you know, where they used to keep the planes and stuff like that. Airfield, you know. And so I love working down there because of the history and sort of everything, and there's sort of plaques on the walls of the lookout shelters, and you know, a few of the hangar sheds are still up. You know, they were being used for other things, but they were still up. They were still in really good condition. We looked after them, you know, and all of that, you know. And I have to say, I really enjoyed being down there. And of course, the other thing that happened was that being on the marsh, not too far away, was the bombing range. Now, if you were lucky and you were in that field and they came along bombing, you would sometimes take an unexpected break just to sit and watch them. You know, you weren't in range, so you was perfectly safe. You know, it wasn't a case of you're better off being a moving target rather than a sitting target. You were perfectly, you know, sort of safe, and you know, out of range of these helicopters and planes and everything else that's down there, you know. And this is what happened at 3:45. I'm getting near the telegraph poles, right? And I'm saying to myself, right, got to keep my wits about me, right? At 10:45, the first Hercules aeroplane comes over, right? And I'm thinking, that's usually followed by, you know, jets and helicopters and stuff like that. I'm thinking out here that's normally followed by, I'm sure it's not what the Air Force do, but it's kind of like a bit of a, you see one of them, I think it's like a pre-warning, the bombing range is about to be used. You know, if you are on there, you know, just take caution, because you can walk on the bombing range. There is a control tower there. There's, you know, and there is an army guard there. And when the bombing range is going to be used, you get sort of taken off part of it, and you can still walk on some part of it while, you know, while they're bombing, sort of thing. You know, again, you're considered sort of safe where you are. And I, you know, I've always seen those Hercules as kind of, we're coming to bomb. If you're in the way, get out of the way, because they're only a couple of minutes away. You know, so that's kind of how I've always read them, right? Because they always seem to come just before the bombing range gets used anyway. So I'm now looking at the pylons and looking at the press arm, looking at all of that. But I'm also now looking in the sky for planes. It's now 4:02, right? And I see the first plane that flies over but doesn't do anything, right? And obviously as it goes into the distance, I lose it, right? There's no more planes, right? And I'm sort of thinking, a bit odd if that's just going to be all that it is, you know. I'm now in and around the pylons, right? I'm now sort of coming, so I'm having to leave my press one side of the pylons, go plough the other side, and then sort of the farm, if you were plough pressing in there, the farm didn't mind you, like the boss man didn't mind you leaving the section either side of the pylons and telegraph poles and all of that. They didn't mind you leaving that unpressed, because it was awkward and difficult to get the press round and steer around with the plough and that. So you would leave it the other side, and then what you would do is you would go the far side of the pylons, of, you know, the opposite side to where the press was, plough that all the way until you go past the other side, and then you would come back in and then plough that up and down, so it met then where you were ploughing on the other. Oh, that's not concentrating, is it? You know, on the other side. So I hope I'm explaining this okay. So I've dropped my press now, and it's now about 10 past 4, about 4 I would say. I've got the radio on. I'm listening to football. I'm listening to my local team, Peterborough United. Yes, there is a fan. It's me. Although not much of a fan now, I have to say, because of there's a few things happening at the club that I don't really agree with. But anyway, that's another story. And the commentator on the thing goes, "Oh, you know, we're now going to switch to Aintree for the Grand National, right?" So the Grand National is now on, right? It's literally just started, right? I've come up to this pylon, right? I'm turning round. As I'm turning round, 4, 5 planes, helicopters, all fly over, and the next thing you see are these bright, sort of yellowy, sort of orangey glows as the missiles and bombs and that leave the aircraft going down to the target, right? And I'm thinking, wow, you know. And I've sort of then looked at where I am, sort of, right, yeah, I just need to swing. And what I'd either forgotten or hadn't realised was there was a telegraph pole behind me, and my press arm has come around, has grabbed it. Literally, I mean, like, it must have, well, as I say, I don't want to make it sound too bad, because it makes me sound awful. And I am, because, you know, it was a mistake that I made, and I'm not the only one, thankfully, to make that mistake in that field. So Ray has also hit those telegraph poles, as too has John, both with plough drill and combine, apparently, because they're very awkwardly positioned, and in fact, again, I might even, if I can, he's not there at the moment, he's on holiday at the moment, but when he gets back, I might ask him if I can go into that field and take a picture. I'll ask him if I can use the gator, because it'd be too far to me to walk across that field. I would never be able to walk that field now, but he might let me use the gator and go and have a look. But yeah, so I've now hit the telegraph pole, right? In my complete panic, I've then swung the opposite way and knocked down the electricity pylon. And I mean, I've knocked it down, right? I've knocked this pylon spark out like this. It's laying on the floor, it's sparking, it's hissing, it's smoking, it's everything, right? And I'm like, oh, and so I'm thinking, and my first thought was, I gotta get out, I'll get electrocuted, I gotta get out. So I've grabbed my phone and I've opened the door just to get out, and then something within me was like, hang on a minute, you've just electrified the floor. I've got to be honest, I don't think touching metal steps and then getting down onto the floor is going to be the best idea that you could have. I'm thinking at the moment, these bloody great rubber tyres are stopping me from being electrocuted. And so I closed the door. I don't know why, right? I don't know why I did this, right? But I closed the door like it was connected to a pressure pad on a bomb trigger, right? I mean, I literally like really gently closed this door, like that was going to make a difference, right? Because I didn't open it gentle. I nearly smashed through the glass in my John Deere 6620. Right? So, like, you know, like I say, I don't know why I closed the door so gently. So then I tried to ring, you see, and I couldn't get through. Like, my phone just wouldn't work, right? I could not get no signal, right? So I'm like, oh, I'm stuck. I thought, what the hell do I do? I'm thinking like, and then I was like, thinking, CB, thinking CB. That might work, and it did work. And luckily, I was able to get through to another tractor driver, not one of our tractor drivers, but with some of the local farms that have CBs, we kind of like, you know, and so I got hold of him, and I sort of said to him, I said, look, I've knocked them down, and he was like, fucking hell, mate. He said, whatever you do, don't get out. I said, nah, I nearly made that mistake. I said, I opened the door, was about to put my foot on the step. He said, well, he said, you obviously didn't, because you're still talking to me. So I said, yeah. I said, I got back in. So he said, yeah, get back in. He said, don't get out. Whatever you do, don't get out. So I said, no. I said, like, and it's knocked my phone signal out and everything. He said, oh yeah, it will do, mate. So anyway, he said, what I'll do, he said, I'll get on to the boss man. So I said, okay. I said, thank you very much. He said, don't get out. So I said, no. He said, because he'll have to ring the electricity board. They'll have to cut the electric, and then you can get out. I said, yeah. I said, thanks very much. You know, I said, like, you know, really appreciate it, sort of thing. And come on, tractor. Come on. Yeah, there we go. And anyway, I'm sort of sitting there. Anyway, but eventually the boss man does get through to me. So at the farm, we have CB aerials. You know, we have a CB, you know, where you can talk to the drivers from the farm, right? So he then gets hold of me, and he says to me, he says, what on earth have you done? So I said, and I explained. He said, you do realise, he said, the whole village is off. So I said, off electric. So I said, yeah. He said, and the phone line's dead. So I said, yeah. I said, I sort of figured that was probably the case. He said, I'll tell you what really hacked me off, shall I, James? And I was like, what? He said, I was watching the Grand National. He said, and you cut my electricity. He said, I spent 5 minutes banging my telly, kicking my telly. And I was like, I said, oh, I'm really sorry. I said, I didn't mean to do it. He said, what on earth was you doing? He said, I told you to be careful in that field. He said, if you didn't feel confident, he said, you should have bloody, you know, just come out the field. He said, like, rung me and gone somewhere else. I said, well, it wasn't that. I didn't. I said, I made a slight, you know, lapse in concentration and a slight error of judgment. I said, and all hell's broke loose. And he goes, so you've hit them? And so he said, you've hit the telegraph pole. So I said, well, yeah. I said, I've given them a bit of a tickle. I said, I won't lie. And And of course, and again, that's me kind of, in my own head thinking, okay, this is a really terrible situation. I feel really bad now. Let's make a joke. Let's make a joke. Let's say something funny. That'll just relieve everything. Everyone will be happy. And of course, 99% of the time, it pisses people off more. And yeah, so I wasn't flavour of the month for about 10 months on the farm. Got to be honest, and because like the other lads, they didn't let me live it down. Every opportunity they got. If it was in a field and we were drilling, and I was power harrowing, or if I was rolling behind the drill, or whatever, they used to be going, "Oh, careful, James. You're halfway across the field. You've got another, 3/4 of the way to go before you hit that telegraph pole," and all this kind of, banter that was coming along, and that I used to get, and the terrible stick I used to. But yeah, I did. I felt terrible. I felt really awful. Like I say, the whole village was off. Anyway, the boss man then said to me, he said, "Look, whatever you do, don't get out." So I said, "No, yes." I said, "I'm sat in my tractor." I said, like, I'm not moving. So he said, "I'll get hold of the electricity board and all the other people, and then we'll get down there." He said, like, "And then we'll get someone down there to make it safe so you can get out." So I said, "Okay." He said, "Are the wires wrapped around the tractor?" So I said, No, the wires are away from the tractor." I said, "They're not even wrapped around the plough or anything." I said, "They're away from both the tractor and the plough." So he said, "Nothing's connected to your tractor or your plough." So I said, I don't think so." I said, "I can't fully, because of my chest situation, I can't fully swivel in my seat because it hurts my chest so much, so I can only sort of turn enough to see the front couple of furrows of the plough, but I can't see the back." I said, like, I said, and he's like, "Well, you're going to have to try and turn round." So in the end, I had to sort of stand up and sort of turn round and what have you. And there was a wire that was on the back. It was sort of on the back furrow and round the wheel of the plough. And he said, "Yeah, don't get out." He said, "'Cause obviously you don't know what that wire is." He said, if it's a telephone wire, he said, "You're fine." But he said, "If that's an electric wire," he said, like, you might be in trouble. He said, "Just don't get out." So anyway, I sat there for about another 3 hours, and then an electricity board van showed up, and yeah, got a lot of ribbing off them as well. It cost the farm a heck of a lot of money. I don't know how much, but I know that it was, well, I don't know, but I'm guessing it may well have been in, into the sort of tens of thousands of pounds worth of damage, because as I say, I'd like literally, it looked like, a tornado had been through it, and it just uprooted everything and just laid it all out. So yeah, it was not good. It was not good, but never mind. Anyway, as I always say, all is well that ends well, and it ended well. I didn't get electrocuted, I didn't get fried. No one else got injured, apart from a few telegraph poles and electricity pylons and stuff like that. But otherwise, no one else was injured. So yeah, all was well that ended well. And needless to say, I never got the chance in the 5 and a bit years that I was on that farm to plough that field again. Yeah, it was always kind of, I used to go there with the rolls or the power harrow, or like sort of stuff like that. They never did ask me to plough that field again, which I sort of on one level kind of understand and I get, but kind of on another level, I'm kind of like, really, I'm allowed to make one mistake, surely. John's hit it with the combine auger, he's hit it with the header, he still gets to combine the field, but yeah, so I was never allowed to plough that field again. But yeah, it was, one of those things, you live and learn. And because the second farm I went on, they just, because they didn't know, they just put me in fields, and and touch wood, I never did hit another telegraph pole, and I worked again in fields where there was multiple poles and different, and I never did it no more, because you learn from your mistakes, especially if you survive them. You learn from them, and you make sure that you're doubly vigilant. I mean, I didn't say, I never did say that I was watching the planes and the helicopters, and that's the reason why I hit them. because I didn't think that would go down too well either. But yeah, so I never did it again. And you know, as I say, I've ploughed many a field and worked many a field with sprayers and whatever else, with telegraph poles and electricity pylons, but you know, never had a problem thereafter. And like I say, just because that was always in my head, and you know, I just kept it fresh in my mind, kept my concentration, you know, was highly alert. I mean, one of the things I used to do, which I know is a bit silly, but I always used to turn my radio off when I got near them, so I literally had no distractions, and I would literally just zone in on my tractor, the width, the length, and you know, just make sure that I got round it. As soon as I was past them, you know, the radio would go back on, I'd start, you know, prattling about and singing and dancing and everything else, you know. But up until that point, you know, no, it was full concentration. But yeah, anyway, hopefully we enjoyed that little story. I'll tell you about my failures as well as my successes, and there's probably way more failures than there are successes, perhaps, I don't know. But you know, from getting lost and ploughing the wrong fields, and you know, yeah, lots of different things that have happened over my time on a farm. And you know, as I say, in the end, no one was ever killed, no one was ever injured, you know, and so therefore I can laugh about all of those things now. You know, yes, I did see, you know, people get injured. Yeah, I did see a guy get killed, you know, which was a very tragic thing, and it shook me up for a long time, that did, because it was such a simple error that person made, and as I say, he paid with his life for it, and you sort of look at yourself and sort of think, I could have done that, you know, I probably would have done that, what he did, and that's ended up killing him, you know. And you know, when I was working on the farm, there was a stat, and the stat was that more people died on farms than died in the armed forces, in a sort of, you know, sort of 2-year period. More people died on farms than they did in the armed forces in the UK, and that was a shocking stat. Again, one that made me, you know, when you were out and about on the farm, you know, you were vigilant and you were watching at all times. So yeah, for those of you that are working on farms and what have you, stay vigilant, take care, stay safe. You know, the most important job you've got for that day is going home that night. You know, and seeing your wife, your family, your kids, whatever. You know, just remember that. You know, the most important job we have every day is making sure we go home, and we go home in one piece. But yeah, you know, and so I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a bit of a chatty one. It's been a bit of a long one, to be fair. Hopefully you're still listening. Hopefully you're still watching. And all that's left for me to say is thanks ever so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye for now.